My name is Ames. I used to draw her hands. Not because they were particularly beautiful, but because they moved like she was always conducting invisible music. I still have pages of them, hands in motion, hands holding things, hands fixing her necklace. She never knew I did it. Last week, her lawyer handed me one of those drawings across a glass table in a mediation room that smelled like old printer paper and lemon disinfectant. The page was folded. Sloppy. He pushed it toward me without looking up and said, almost casually, "She doesn't want this either." That was it. Not hello, not good luck. Just that she doesn't want this either. I stared at the page for a while after he left the room. It was one I drew on a plane, back when we still took trips together. Her fingers were curled slightly like she was asleep, wedding band catching just enough light. I remember I was nervous turbulence would ruin the line work. Now it was creased like trash. And it hit me harder than the divorce itself. She didn't just leave me. She was erasing who I was when I was with her. Piece by piece. Frame by frame. And the worst part? I still thought we could fix it. That night, after the meeting with her lawyer, I didn't go home right away. I drove past our street like I was avoiding an accident site. You know exactly where the pain lives, but for some reason, you still take one more lap around it. I ended up parked in front of an old jazz bar we used to visit in our 20s. We hadn't been there in nearly a decade. Still, I sat in the car and watched strangers go in and out, wondering if any of them were just minutes away from finding out something soul-breaking. I finally went home around midnight. The apartment smelled like her perfume, but fainter now, like it was dissolving into the walls. I walked into the living room and froze. Her smile was still on the wall. There was a canvas we had made together, some trendy paint and wine night she dragged me to where we got tipsy and made goofy versions of each other's faces. Hers was bright, playful, full of life. I had hung it above the bookshelf 2 years ago. But when I got close, I realized something was wrong. The canvas had been cut clean, like with a razor. Just a small corner, lower right. It was the part where I had signed my initials. A.S. Gone. She had come back while I was out and sliced me out of the painting. I didn't even know what to feel. Was it petty? Symbolic? A message? I stood there for 15 minutes, just staring at a cartoon version of her smiling, while the real her was likely curled up in someone else's bed, forgetting I ever existed. I sat on the couch and opened her old laptop. She had left it behind, but never wiped it. And that's when I made the mistake of checking her photo albums. Not for revenge. Not out of curiosity. Just, maybe some part of me hoped I'd find proof that she had loved me once. What I found was worse. There were pictures, hundreds of them. But the ones from the last few months? All new places. Hotels. Lounges. Beach spots we never visited. And one face that kept appearing again and again. A man with slicked back salt and pepper hair, always taking the picture. In mirrors. In windows. In her sunglasses. His name was Reed. I only knew that because she had once accidentally mentioned it in her sleep. "Reed will know what to do," she'd murmured. I thought she was dreaming about a coworker. I even asked her about it that morning and she laughed it off, told me I must have misheard. But I hadn't misheard. Because the final photo in the album, timestamped 2 days ago, was of the two of them standing in front of a courthouse. Smiling. In the background, through the reflection in the window, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A familiar red car. My car. They had used it. She had used my car to drive with her lover to the courthouse, the very one I was due to appear in the following week. It was like a sick dress rehearsal for the moment I'd lose everything, and she had already celebrated. That's when something in me shut off. Not exploded. Not snapped. It just clicked off. Like someone pulled the plug on who I was supposed to be. I walked into the bedroom, picked up the blanket she used to sleep with, and folded it slowly. Not because I cared, but because she wouldn't. And then I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years and found the thing that would change everything. A sealed letter. With my name on it. In her handwriting. And the return address wasn't ours. It was his. Reed Carlson. And that's when I knew. She had been planning this for a long, long time. I held that letter in my hands for a long time. The envelope was off-white, slightly crumpled like it had been shoved into the back of the drawer in a hurry. But the thing that really caught me, was the waxy lipstick mark on the flap. Bright coral red. The kind of shade she'd always said made her look too loud. I had never seen her wear it. Not once in 13 years. My fingers shook a little as I opened it. Not because I thought it would contain a confession. Honestly, I expected nothing at all. Maybe a grocery list, maybe a cruel joke. But what I unfolded was something different. Something worse. There were only 3 sentences handwritten in her slanted, impatient script. "Reed, here's everything I promised you. He'll never see this coming. Don't forget the judge likes golf used that. That was it. No dates. No signature. Just my name on the outside and her betrayal on the inside. I reread it 10 times as if context would magically appear on the 11th. It didn't. The words were plain, unedited, like she'd been writing them for months in her head. And then it hit me, the envelope wasn't meant for me at all. She must have stuffed it in the wrong drawer by mistake. It was supposed to go to him. And she had delivered it. Everything she promised. Him. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching that note like it was evidence in a crime, which, in a way, it was. Not legal, maybe? But moral? Absolutely. She had planned it all. She didn't fall for Reed by accident. She aligned things. Choreographed them. Fed him details, probably even about my insecurities. I imagined her telling him what would hurt me most. How to speak in court. What tone to use. Maybe even the exact words to say while I sat there, trying not to fall apart in front of a judge who plays 9 holes on Thursdays. And then I thought of that canvas again. The one where she had sliced out my initials. Not out of anger. Out of calculation. I couldn't sleep that night. I left the lights off and sat on the floor of our kitchen, drinking flat ginger ale from the bottle like a child with a stomachache. At some point around 4 a.m. I opened her laptop again, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me whispered, you missed something. And I had. Tucked inside a folder labeled June payroll were a series of PDFs, flight confirmations, hotel bookings, dinner reservations, all to places in Portugal, Monaco, St. Lucia. But the dates were the part that stopped my heart. 2 days after the court date. She wasn't just leaving me. She was escaping me. It was all prepaid. All under her name and his. Even the seats were upgraded to business class. I didn't even know she had a passport. For years, she had told me we couldn't afford a proper vacation. We'd done little staycations, hiking in-state or watching reruns in bed. She once cried because I surprised her with a used espresso machine. She had said, this is the most loved I've ever felt. And now I realized she probably meant it as a joke. She was going to walk out of court that morning, say nothing to me, and get on a plane that same week. With the man she gave everything to. She hadn't just moved on. She had built an entire new life while I was still holding on to crumpled sketches of her fingers. And here's the worst part. I still hadn't told anyone. Not my brother. Not my coworkers. Not even my neighbor Edith, who always asked how my girl was doing every time she saw me picking up mail. I had turned my whole life into a silent museum of a marriage that had already burned down. And I was still sweeping the ash into neat little piles. I knew the court date was just 4 days away. I knew she expected me to be late, disoriented, emotional. That's how they wanted me, unsteady. But I wasn't going to be late. I was going to be ready. And I was bringing something they didn't expect. Not rage. Not revenge. Just truth. And maybe that would be enough. Or maybe it would destroy me. But either way, I wasn't going to let them laugh again. The courthouse lobby smelled like lemon polish and anxiety. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, the way people talk in funeral homes. I stood alone by the vending machine with a folder under my arm and a cup of burnt coffee in my hand. It tasted like ash, but it kept me grounded. I had arrived 25 minutes early. She hadn't shown up yet. Neither had he. But I knew they would. And I was ready. The night before, I hadn't slept. Instead, I sat at my desk for hours, printing screenshots, compiling dates, organizing documents. Not because I wanted revenge. Not even to win. I just needed someone in that courtroom, maybe the judge, maybe even her, to see what I had lived through in silence. And maybe, just maybe, to believe me. When she walked in, she wasn't wearing black like she usually did to court. She wore pale blue. Her hair was done. Her makeup was soft. She looked peaceful, the kind of peace you only see in people who believe they've already won. Reed came in behind her, smirking like he belonged there. He shook hands with her lawyer. He didn't even glance at me. I stood still as they passed me. I think I even nodded slightly. She didn't return it. Inside the courtroom, the air felt 10 degrees colder. I watched her lean in and whisper something to Reed, and they both laughed. Quietly, but not quietly enough. The judge hadn't entered yet. But I had. And I was watching everything. Her attorney stood up first. Spoke about irreconcilable differences, about emotional detachment, about a pattern of unstable behavior. He never once said my name. Just the respondent. Like I was a background object in a house she wanted to sell. And then it was my turn. I didn't have a lawyer. I couldn't afford one. But I had something else. Evidence. I pulled the folder from under my seat, stood up slowly, and walked to the front like I was in a dream. The clerk looked surprised when I asked to submit exhibits, but she took them. The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. This is highly irregular, her attorney said. But it's relevant, I answered quietly. The judge motioned to proceed. What followed wasn't dramatic. No raised voices. No slamming hands. Just page after page of coordinated lies, bookings, receipts, photos with timestamps, screenshots of messages between her and Reed. Her whispering about manipulating timelines. About stalling hearings. About what days I'd be vulnerable. I even submitted a letter I'd found in her journal, a cruel, mocking letter she never sent me but drafted for fun. In it, she listed things I'll do once he's out of the way. The judge was silent for a long time after the last page was handed in. Reed finally leaned over and whispered to her again. But this time she didn't laugh. Her lawyer leaned in, scanning the pages quickly, his face going pale. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she looked directly at me. Not with anger. Not even with hate. With fear. Because she realized I hadn't come there to break down. I came prepared. The judge eventually spoke. Not loudly. Not emotionally. But with a tone that cut through every smug grin in the room. Given the documentation submitted, I am requesting a formal review of spousal claims and joint asset filings. These patterns suggest coordinated misrepresentation. In normal language? That meant their plan to clean me out, take the apartment, the savings, everything was now suspended. Frozen. Under investigation. Reed looked like he had been slapped across the face. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her mouth moved, but the words weren't there. And for the first time in my life, I looked at her and felt nothing. Not love. Not loss. Just space. Like whatever had been between us was no longer around, it was just absence. The judge ended the session early. We would reconvene in 2 weeks. I didn't stay behind. I didn't look back. But just as I walked past the bench where they had been sitting, I noticed something small lying on the floor. A lipstick. Bright coral red. The same shade as the one on the letter. I didn't pick it up. I just stepped over it and walked out into the sun. I didn't drive home right away. I didn't go celebrate. I didn't even tell anyone what happened in court. I just sat in my car outside a diner off Route 84, staring at the tiny crack in my windshield and listening to a podcast I wasn't even registering. I didn't feel victorious. There were no fireworks inside me, no rush of adrenaline, no silent fist pump. Just stillness. And confusion. What do you do when the people who tried to destroy you end up silencing themselves? When the ones who laughed at you can't even make eye contact as the system they relied on begins to turn on them? The court had postponed any final judgment. That meant no win, no loss, just waiting. But the moment the judge's tone shifted, something else shifted too. I had walked into that courtroom expecting to be humiliated again, but instead I watched them flinch under their own lies. And that image haunted me more than their betrayal. Because now I wasn't the weak one. And I didn't know how to carry that. I'd spent so long trying to survive inside the pain she left me with that I never prepared for what would come after it. It's a strange thing, realizing your heart no longer wants what it used to fight for. I didn't want her back. I didn't want her to suffer either. What I wanted, what I craved, was clarity. And maybe something like peace. But clarity is cruel. It doesn't come in warmth. It arrives with cold logic and sharper edges. That night, I opened the box of old letters and keepsakes I'd packed away right after she left. Inside was a small notepad she'd once used to write me sleepy messages when I worked overnight shifts. One of them read, "No one makes me feel more at home than you do. Don't forget the almond milk." I used to carry that with me in my wallet. Like a charm. Reading it now, it felt like it belonged to someone else's life entirely. But I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I just folded it slowly and slid it back into the envelope. Because even the lies have fingerprints. And I needed to see where hers ended and mine began. I spent the rest of the night writing. Not messages to her. Not angry drafts I'd delete in the morning. Just words for myself. I wrote down everything I had buried, things I hadn't said out loud in years. Like how I'd started feeling invisible around her a year before Reed even showed up. How I'd catch her staring into space at dinner, chewing slower, blinking like she was somewhere else entirely. I wrote about the night I found a single glass in the dishwasher with red wine stains when I'd been drinking nothing but water for weeks. And I remembered the time I asked her if she was happy, and she smiled and said, "Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answer to." I thought she meant it as a joke. But I knew better now. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't obsess over her social media or reread old texts. I took a walk. I passed a family of 3 holding hands outside the grocery store. I saw a dog stick its head out of a pickup truck window, tongue flapping in the wind like nothing mattered but movement. and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Just emptied out. Not broken. Just cleared. Like something old had finally moved through me. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Not some grand gesture or apology or moment of closure, but a silent, subtle shift where their story stops running through your veins. And yours finally begins again. It was Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. I hadn't spoken to anyone from her side of the family in over 5 months. Not since she moved out and silence replaced every shared holiday and birthday reminder. When I saw the name Marley, Claire's sister, pop up on the screen, I stared at it like it was a glitch. I debated letting it go to voicemail. But some part of me, the part that still clung to the idea of answers, made me swipe right and press the phone to my ear. Ames, she said, no small talk. Can we meet? Her voice sounded tighter than usual. There was urgency but also restraint, like someone forcing themselves to stay polite at a funeral. I said nothing for a few seconds, then answered, I guess that depends why. She didn't hesitate. Because I think you deserve to know the truth. Not just the affair. The rest. I met her at a small coffee shop near the library, the kind of place where the walls are painted dark green and every cup comes in a mug that doesn't match the saucer. She was already sitting when I arrived, both hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her eyes locked on the street outside. She looked older than I remembered. Or maybe just tired in a way that wasn't physical. Thanks for coming, she said. I sat down. What truth? She took a deep breath. Claire lied to all of us. Not just you. When she left, she told our parents that you were emotionally manipulative, that you used money to control her, that you made her feel like a captive. I blinked. What? It was calculated, Marley said, because she knew if she made herself the victim in every story, no one would ask about Reed. She framed you, and it worked. I shook my head slowly, disbelief in something deeper. Betrayal layered on top of betrayal, tightening in my chest. Why are you telling me this now? Because she went too far, Marley said, pulling out a folded piece of paper from her purse. I found this in my parents' house. It's a copy of a statement she sent to her lawyer. She claimed you threatened her safety. She used it to pressure you into not contesting the original settlement. I opened the paper and read it. There it was, typed, notarized, dated weeks before the first hearing. Claire's words. Words that painted me as unstable. Words I hadn't even known existed. She did this to ensure you'd break down, Marley continued. So when you didn't, when you came to court with facts instead of emotions, she panicked. I stared at the paper, the back of my throat dry. She knew exactly how to make me look like the crazy one. And we believed her, Marley whispered, ashamed. Even I did for a while. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a while. There was nothing to say. Because there are levels of betrayal, and then there are whole strategies built on your destruction. And learning that the woman I once sketched with such tenderness had gone as far as planting lies in legal records, that she had used systems meant to protect people to attack me, it was something deeper than heartbreak. It was calculated erasure. So what now? I asked finally. Now, Marley said. You do whatever you need to. Tell the court. Expose the document. Tell your side before she spins another one. Why are you helping me? I asked, not unkindly. Because you were good to her, she said. You were boring and predictable and soft. And that's exactly what she needed. But it wasn't what she wanted. And that's not your fault. I left the coffee shop with the document in my coat pocket and something heavier in my chest, not rage, not even sadness. Just weight. The weight of everything I didn't know I needed to carry. When I got home, I didn't pour a drink or go numb. I sat at my desk, and I wrote a statement of my own. Not to fight her. Not to punish her. But to reclaim the version of me that she tried to erase. Because I had lived this story. Every hour. Every silence. Every humiliation. And finally, I was going to make sure someone heard it, the way it actually happened. The morning of the second hearing was so quiet it felt rehearsed. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my breath and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. It was the same machine that had grown to life the night I found the letter, the night I realized everything I loved had become background noise to someone else's future. But this time it wasn't just me dragging through the routine of survival. I was ready. I had the notarized statement Claire had filed falsely against me. I had printouts. I had timelines. I had the folder clutched in my hands like it contained my entire spine. I didn't tell Marley I was going to use it. I didn't want to put her in the crosshairs if things went sideways. The drive to the courthouse felt different now. Not like marching toward the edge of a cliff, but like walking back into a fire with a bucket of water and knowing you wouldn't burn this time. The courthouse was busier than the last time. I recognized none of the faces in the waiting area, but I recognized the looks: confusion, exhaustion, dread. Divorce is its own language. When I entered the courtroom, Claire was already seated with Reed and her attorney. She looked paler than usual, but composed. She didn't make eye contact with me. Neither did he. And that was fine. I wasn't there for theater. When the judge walked in, there was a quick shuffle of paperwork, the usual formalities, and then came something unexpected. Before we begin, the judge said, flipping through a folder, I want to address a document submitted anonymously and verified through a clerk's intake last week. I tensed. I hadn't submitted anything anonymously. But I didn't speak. The judge cleared his throat and held up a familiar paper. My heart stopped. It was the letter Claire had written to Reed. The one I'd found in the drawer. The one with the lipstick mark and the words, "He'll never see this coming." I had never submitted it. It was too ambiguous, too vulnerable, too personal. This letter was reviewed and cross-referenced with timelines already on file, the judge said. Combined with evidence submitted during the previous hearing and in light of the newly discovered falsified threat statement, I am now issuing a motion for full reevaluation of both character statements and financial submissions related to this divorce. Claire's face went still. Reed turned sharply to her, whispering something urgent. Her lawyer blinked rapidly and stood up. Your Honor, we would request clarification as to the source. The source is irrelevant, the judge interrupted. Its authenticity has been confirmed. And unless the petitioner wishes to claim this letter is also fabricated, which we have handwriting samples to dispute, we will proceed with the reevaluation immediately. I sat frozen. Someone had submitted the letter. Someone who had access to it. But it wasn't me. And it wasn't Marley. I hadn't told her about that letter. Then it hit me. The envelope. The one Claire had originally misfiled. I had left it on the table the day she stopped by to sign over her half of the utilities. She must have seen it and maybe in a moment of panic took it and threw it away. And someone else found it. The cleaning crew, the landlord, maybe even a clerk who handled recycling. However it happened, it was now on record. And it blew open everything. The judge continued speaking, but I barely heard the words. My name kept echoing in the space like it had been airbrushed into the wood panels, Mr. Ames. Mr. Ames, but not with pity. With presence. With weight. With attention. Claire finally looked at me. For the first time, her stare didn't say, I'm ahead of you. It said, how did this happen? And I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just held her gaze and let the silence speak for me. This wasn't a victory lap. This wasn't about revenge. This was justice starting to clear its throat. When the hearing adjourned, Reed stormed out first, gripping his phone so hard it looked like it might shatter. Claire stayed seated a few seconds longer. I walked past her slowly. She didn't say a word. But just before I stepped through the door, I heard her whisper something. Not to me. Not to anyone. Just barely audible. I never thought he'd fight back. And the truth is neither did I. The paperwork came through 6 weeks later. A plain manila envelope, no fanfare. Just a court seal, a signature, and a declaration, divorce finalized. No spousal support. No assets transferred. Everything frozen pending review. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just set it down on my kitchen counter, walked outside, and let the air fill my lungs in a way I hadn't felt in years. There's something strange that happens when you stop being afraid of being alone. You start hearing your own voice again. Not the voice you used to keep the peace or fill the silence, but the real one, the voice that asks questions, makes stupid jokes, hums to itself without realizing it. That voice had been gone a long time. Now it was back. I started changing small things. I threw out the plates we bought together and bought mismatched ones from a thrift store, every piece different. I painted the wall where the canvas used to hang. It had been bare for months, that smiling version of her haunting the living room like a relic. But now it was soft gray-blue, like the ocean before rain. I picked up my sketch pad again, but this time I didn't draw hands. I drew my own face over and over until it started looking like someone I might actually want to meet. One evening, a woman named Hallie from my building knocked on my door. I had helped her carry groceries once and we'd made awkward small talk about bad elevator music. She said she was heading to the rooftop garden and invited me along. I almost said no. But something in her tone wasn't flirtation, it was simplicity. It was normal. We talked about books, music, terrible coffee. We didn't talk about Claire. I didn't want to. Hallie didn't ask. Weeks passed. I didn't count them anymore. Life no longer felt like a series of losses. It started to feel open. Quiet. Honest. One morning I woke up before my alarm. Sunlight hit the ceiling in soft lines. I lay there, arms behind my head, not rushing anywhere, not bracing for the next hit. And that's when I realized something so simple it made me laugh out loud. I didn't hate her anymore. She hadn't won. Not really. She had run from her truth, reshaped the narrative, tried to erase me like I was just a footnote. But in the end, she couldn't destroy what she never fully understood. I had flaws, sure. I was soft. I let things slide. I carried too much quietly. But none of that made me weak. It made me real. And in a world where people lie like it's currency, being real is a kind of rebellion. That night I cooked dinner. Just for myself. Pasta with garlic and lemon, wine I actually liked, and music playing low from a speaker she never even knew I owned. And I raised a glass, not to revenge, not to victory, not even to survival. But to me. To the version of me that stayed kind even when it hurt. To the version that broke but didn't rot. To the man who finally understood that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just a quiet dinner, in your own space, under your own light, knowing you made it through without becoming like the ones who tried to ruin you. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man who was left behind. I felt like a man who finally caught up with himself. And he was worth waiting for.